Welcome to our Coaches Kitchen Table Discussion Series, where you join myself and the top coaches and influencers in the sport community, where we talk about a variety of topics related to coaching, athlete development, and so on. In this episode, part 1 of 2, we speak with special guest Dawna Sales. Dawna is the Director of Athlete and Coach Pathways at Volleyball Canada and was a former Technical Director at Volleyball BC. In this episode, Dawna will discuss Volleyball Canada's involvement in international competition at the youth level, as well as youth programs offered by Volleyball Canada. Dawna, thanks again for joining us here on my kitchen table. Why don't we start with just getting a background on what your coaching background is, your personal background, and then maybe tell us a little bit about your position at Volleyball Canada.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry if I sounded a little nasally. I had nose surgery last Thursday, and I told Colin I would be here. So if I sound a little nasally, it's not how I normally sound, and hopefully in 3 weeks I sound a lot better. But thank you for having me. So I'm Dawna Sales, and I'm the Director of Athlete and Coach Pathways, and I've been in that role for almost 2 years now, and I took over that role. James Snedden was the previous director. We sort of switched roles dates are running together for me now, about a year, well over a year ago now, and he's been on leave for Volleyball Canada since last August, so a year, and so I was in the interim. But my background is I started out, I actually have a degree from the University of Victoria in sport management, and went into volleyball right away because it was a sport that I always loved, and I loved the people that I had always known. So I started with Volleyball BC in 1992 as a summer student, and didn't stray very far. I went to the Richmond Olympic Oval in 2008, actually as the customer service manager, which I'll tell you I was not very good at, because anybody that wanted a refund, I was like, no problem. Like I didn't want, I just was like, it was chaos. But I was there sort of for the games, and then a couple of years after I left there in 2012. But during my time there, I had started the Center of Excellence. Because it is an Olympic venue, there were legacy ties to high performance sport. And one of my directives was to create a high performance connection to national sport organizations through the Richmond Olympic Oval. So I started the Center of Excellence then in 2011, 2012, and James came to me not that much after that started and said, we have an opportunity through on the podium to expand this program. And is that something you'd sort of be interested in doing? And I was like, yes, I always loved volleyball, and was sort of feeling like there was another opportunity for me career-wise, and came to Volleyball Canada in 2012 and have been here now for 8 years. And I started off really focused on the rep programs. So the regional excellence programs, they were the VCCE, Volleyball Canada Centers of Excellence, across the country. At its peak, we had about 24 different programs between licensed and Volleyball Canada driven programs. We're somewhere between sort of 12 and 16, depending on the year and the semester. And we can talk a little bit more about that. And then over the course of time, I'm usually never quite settled with just doing one thing. So an opportunity came to move the NTCCs, the National Team Challenge Cup. I remember sitting in Winnipeg at the women's event, and there was 10 teams there, and it was in the middle of the summer in the university, and there was like, Brendan probably can laugh, but there was maybe, I don't know, 15 people in the stands, like some parents had kind of come. Nobody knew about the event. It was a high performance provincial team event, and nobody knew about it. And we all sort of, I just said to James, I looked at him, and maybe I'll regret this one day. I just looked at him and I said, we have to do better than this. We have to do better than this. And so then the next year, might have been the next year, year after, we expanded that to add in the youth. It wasn't called the Youth National Team, it was called the Youth National Development Program. And so what we did is after that event, we selected athletes to stay and train as our youth national team, or youth national development program. And we had about 36, I think, Brenda, maybe on the guy side, about 30, between 30 and 36 through that program. And that then evolved to the Canada Cup which is now in existence on the indoor side, to a 44-team event. It was in Halifax last year, to a joint event with men and women together, 2 different divisions. They're cut up by age group, but U16, U18, and really trying to create an event in Canada that teams want to be part of, coaches want to be part of, and a really great experience for the athletes. So that's how that evolved. The youth national team and the select national team continue to evolve with a consistent effort to send teams to the high performance championships down in Florida every summer. We originally had a lot of provincial teams sort of sending teams down, and we were like, well, why doesn't Volleyball Canada send a national team down and sort of test ourselves against the top US teams and other countries? And so that started that process. And then a few years ago, I don't have the exact date, so I'll just say a few years ago, NORCECA, through their and FIVB, started to add these age group championships. These age group championships have existed for a long time, but it wasn't something that Canada, we didn't feel that we should send teams, could send teams based on the dates of NORCECA events. We obviously in Canada have a very short window when we can send teams. July and August, typically, June, July, and August. And these events for NORCECA can be held at any time. And so that was a real challenge for us to wrap our heads around the idea that we could take athletes in May, club season, and take them to a international event. So that sort of evolved over the years, and we've been working with NORCECA to really push to have those events in a time when our athletes are available. And so that's how we sort of continue to evolve the youth and junior national team programs.
Awesome. That's a lot of quick development over time for kids, but why did Volleyball Canada, or where are they coming and why are they deciding this is important now and not 20 years ago or 15 years ago, that it's important now to have our youth participating at the highest level or at international level?
I think quite a big answer to that is just exposure. Our athletes are exposed, and fortunately and unfortunately, our athletes typically don't leave Canada, possibly until they're 23 or 24 years old, and after they finish their U Sport or CCAA careers. And other countries are not doing that. Other countries are exposing their youth athletes to these types of programs much earlier in their careers, much earlier. And we saw that was a gap for us. And that was a big part of it, is that we recognize that we know we've got some gaps in our system. Obviously that 19 to 24 is a bit of a gap, but we also know that if we don't do anything different, we're not going to change it. And so that's really where that came from, and also NORCECA wanting us, feeling that Canada should be attending these events and we should be getting results. If we're where we are internationally with our senior teams, there's no reason that we shouldn't be continuing to do well at the youth level. We also know that countries that do well, I don't have the exact stats, but the countries that do well at World Championships, at Olympic Games, all those other things, have done well at the youth level. Fairly consistently over time. So for us to catch up would be very, very challenging.
Okay. And I guess the thought process is costs money to do all this. So how much support does Volleyball Canada get from wherever you get your funding, so federal government, and I guess maybe provincial organizations to help support these? Or does this sort of tie in the availability of being able to help support the athletes here comes a lot from changing the national tournaments to more of a jamboree now, where revenue generation is a lot higher than it used to be when it was just your top teams would go for your national championships?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's always a tough one to answer. So we received some funding from On the Podium that fell into what we refer to as system development. So that's how the REP programs really started. So the REP programs they're a sustainable program that generates revenue for Volleyball Canada, that pays for my salary and pays for us to have more resources within our domestic, so our pathways area. But for the most part, unfortunately, a lot of the programs that we run are user pay. That is a really unfortunate side. Until our athletes get to junior on the men's side, that's really the only time they sort of start to see carding or tuition waivers or that type of thing. So typically it is user pay. We're lucky in some areas that we've been able to, take advantage of, good deals on dorms, good deals on flights, those types of things. But it comes at a cost. It means that we don't get to train for 2 or 3 months. We might get to train for 8 days because we're very, very aware of the cost to families to run these types of programs. So unfortunately, it is at this point in time, for the most part, it's user pay.
Okay. Interesting. And have we participated in, other than junior, I think the junior is the youngest group so far that's participated in NORCECA tournaments, or have we had younger than is that 21 or is that 19 or it depends on the gender?
Yeah, so our junior team, our U21 team, traditionally has always gone to NORCECA championships to qualify for Worlds. That's been quite, and I couldn't give you how long that's been going on for, a long time. The team that we sent to Worlds last year was our U18 team. So they had gone to NORCECA the year before that. So they would have been 16 at the time going to that NORCECA championships. And I believe that may be one of the younger teams to go, but I don't have the exact, I don't have the exact history on that.
Right. So, but it's just started. Like that was like sort of the first experience where we sent our young kids to across the world to compete, or NORCECA is not across the world, but in South America type travel and stuff like that, where it's totally unique for them. So
we could have in the past, and I'm so young. I haven't been around. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't. I know that many know the history far better than I do. So I don't want to say anything. But for us, the challenge has been the consistency, and that's really where we've focused the efforts in the last 4 or 5 years, is to ensure that we're consistently having teams at the youth level every summer, regardless of the competition they go to. For example, this summer, our U21 teams would have had 2 events, our U20 would have had 2 events, our U18s would have had 2 events, and our U19s would have had 2 events in, I believe it was 5 different countries. So you can sort of appreciate how vast that could be and how challenging that could be for young athletes and coaches, and for us at Volleyball Canada to be able to pull off.
Yeah. Yes.
I was nervous. I was definitely nervous. I wasn't sure I was going to go. So I was holding my breath, and not that I like the outcome. I do not like what the outcome was, but at the same time, I was gathering the resources to make sure we could actually make that happen.
Right. Well, at least we're started, right? I mean, everything has to start somewhere, and you only learn by trying. You don't learn by not doing it. So hopefully we'll be able to gain experience, and then I guess because of the challenge of time frame. I mean, America is in the same boat in terms of their window of allowing their youth to participate too. Does NORCECA sort of recognize that and sort of start to try to change their tournament dates to suit the ones that would probably host the most?
I'd like to say yes. I'd like to say that we've worked really hard with NORCECA to be at the board, at the table, in terms of those discussions. We don't have final say, but one of the things that we've worked hard on is planning ahead so that we can get to them, get to NORCECA and say, okay, we're on the calendar to host. This is what we'd like to do, so that we can be just ahead of that planning. And we have to pick and choose our battles a little bit on that. We also have a U23 age category that we haven't really talked about or hasn't been part of our plan, which is our next gen group. Typically hosting is great, but it's also very challenging. And we see Sport Canada looking to host sort of the U20, not much below next gen. They really want to be hosting international events, but they're not that interested in sort of the U18 NORCECA events. So, Edmonton was going to be an interesting one with our U20 and our U21 men. U21 men wasn't going to be as much of an issue, but the U20 women, based on the age, we were going to have to be pretty creative in how we managed that team and that program. But it was worth it for us because we had the resources around the nationals to be able to support hosting a youth event in Canada.
Right. Okay. Well, are we still doing that? We're going to still be able to host that? Have they changed the dates?
We won't, I believe, I'd have to look. I'd have to talk to Alan, our director of international events. We are on the calendar next year, I think, to host a U18, and everything's so up in the air. So, we obviously would like to host one or two, but like this year, there were supposed to be 2 events per age group. So now with timing and world championships planned for 2021, I say planned, I don't know when they are, I don't know where they are. What does that look like? Does that look like an event in December between Christmas and New Year's? Does that look like an event in March and only one event to qualify for Worlds? That's just information we don't have yet.
And will they with the postponing of the Olympics have an impact on that as well?
Adriana might know more than I do on this one. We haven't heard that. We haven't heard anything, to be honest, on the youth age class side for NORCECA / World Championships for 2021. There hasn't been any announcement. I haven't looked at the NORCECA website in a couple weeks, but when I looked last time, the events for this year hadn't even been postponed.
Yeah. Everybody holds on to the last minute, just in case. There's a quick cure.
We keep waiting for some official, word, and then it's like, oh, be patient. We're like, okay, well, so we've also, what this has really brought to the forefront, and I think it's important to recognize, is that in Canada, we highly value our athlete and our coaches' health and safety and wellness. And we've really said to NORCECA, like, you can't just throw an event in and think that we're going to show up. So we need X amount of time to be able to prepare our athletes, be able to prepare a program. So this has been a really, it's been a strong message from Volleyball Canada to NORCECA on that front. So we're, we continue to work on that.
Cool. I see Louise has remembered, because I forgot to mention that if you have a question, everybody, just type it in the chat room, and then when we have a break like now, we'll get Louise to turn on her mic, and she can go ahead and ask her question, and then we'll get Dawna to answer it.
Okay, this might have been asked before, but just as a general question, the other countries are able to make the tournaments, so how come we're not looking at the processes they're doing for training and everything else and trying to apply it? Because you've already got the lessons learned, or you already had countries go through this type of training. So I'm just wondering, have we looked at that, and why aren't we trying to incorporate more of that if they've already had the success and able to attend these? Because it sounds like we're just starting.
Yeah,
thanks. That's a great question. Are we just starting? I'm not sure. I would say we're evolving. We're evolving as in terms of a volleyball nation. I've only been involved for a few years, but where we are internationally is significant, and that's happened in a very short period of time and in the sporting world. I can't speak necessarily to other countries in the sense that their systems are just not the same as ours. Our country is very big. We can't just go to a competition on the weekend. We can't just bring athletes together for a weekend. In Canada, education is incredibly important to our athletes and to our families and our obviously our coaches. So pulling kids out of their post-secondary or secondary school for months on end is very challenging. And so we're just looking at ways. So a good example is the NET program. So the National Excellence Program, which is starting in September in Richmond. So we've invited 16 of the top athletes in Canada in the 17-18 age group for girls to train them for 4 months. So we've looked at that as a potential of how we're going to make a difference, and how we can look at ways to make sure they get their education, make sure they're healthy and in a good environment to be able to do that. It's the first time we've ever done that with that age athlete, whereas other countries, I believe, because of their pro system, allow that to happen much more readily than we do in Canada. We're a post-secondary based sort of environment, and that's something that we're just looking at ways that we can augment that within our realities.
Yeah, and I agree. I think part of the big issue is that we're a kitchen table organization in terms of club development, right? Whereas where you talk about France or you talk about Brazil, they're all club-based or professional-based programs that filter down to their youth programs and can help control that. And or the academics intertwine with athletics in terms of sports schools and high performance areas and centers of excellence, way beyond what we presently do in Canada. And I've been preaching what you guys have are starting up for the last 5 years, saying we should be doing this on a regular basis. And it's something that we can do now. And I think the success of the program, I mean, Carrie was mentioning how many hundreds of applications you had for that program. What just shows you that there's that desire out there for that type of commitment to the sport at a younger age. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to develop those types of programs and give those athletes those types of benefits that they need for the high performance side of it too.
I would also suggest, Colin, just to add on to when you talk about, like, we also recognize long-term athlete development is part and parcel of everything we do. We have had I'll say, I don't know what the word is to use. I can't think of one right off the top of my head. But we know that identifying 14-year-olds for high performance volleyball is not necessarily going to give us success at the Olympics. And so that's something we also balance in part of our mandate and part of our pathways, is that we want to make sure that that door stays open. For the boys, it can be 17, 18, 19. We want to make sure that that door stays open. For the girls, it's slightly younger. We didn't run a U18 program this summer for a virtual program for the girls because U18 for NORCECA and FIVB is 2004 born. So it's athletes that are just going into grade 11. We recognized very early on that age group for us is, for all intents and purposes, no matter what we want to believe, is unidentified. So they've only played at 16U level for the most part. So if we go and all of a sudden identify them that early without ever having seen them play, because we didn't have nationals and we didn't have provincials, and identify them really early on, that can be very detrimental to them long term. And we know, and Carrie can talk, we can all talk stats forever, that doesn't necessarily help our programs long term. So we also have to be careful and balance the early identification of athletes and the early specialization of athletes to ensure that our programs have success moving forward long term.
Yeah, and that's sort of what the VCC/REP/ whatever it is, whatever the new term will be this year. Just bugging you on that one, but that's sort of what the point of that program is, right? Is to give athletes an opportunity to get the repetitions, to give as many athletes that want to pursue that area an opportunity to get those repetitions in a way that's meaningful and that will add to what they're doing, to continue to develop that base to help them get identified and be put into a system where you guys can start seeing them in some capacity and then recognizing them at nationals, 17U and 16 and 17U nationals, because they've been in the Volleyball Canada Center of Excellence program, or Regional Excellence program now. And so that you at least have some data on them as well, right? So that's helping to identify and at least start to narrow that field down a little bit, but not also narrow it so far down where you're just taking the best volleyball player at the day to take them to a tournament to compete at something that in reality probably won't have any huge impact on the Olympics going forward, or World Championships at the senior level.
Yeah, and you know, I was at the Provincial Association for about 12 years with Volleyball BC. And now having kind of been on, I don't want to say the other side because it's not the other side. What I've seen in the last 4 years is the desire to work together, to identify athletes, to support programs is really, really important. The provincial associations have done and continue to do an excellent job of sort of that introduction, that initial sort of intro to high performance. And that's something that I would say has opened the doors. I see them running younger programs. We'd like those numbers to be quite big at the base. You know, the 14s, 15s, and 16s, we don't want to see those too narrow. So we do have some work to do on that. But working with the provinces to identify the athletes has been a real strategic partnership that I believe is going to be continued and is supported at both levels.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you talk about the evolution and the sort of what the philosophy is of the VCC, because that's the one that most coaches probably don't know a lot about, but the ones that they could get their athletes and themselves, depending on where it is, the location, get involved in the soonest or the quickest in terms of that next level of volleyball.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the REP programs, so the regional excellence programs, those have evolved, and I wish we had them in every community. I am always looking to expand that program. The real priority for that is that it's not team-based, it's not age group-based, that it's solely skill development-based. And so we have two programs one in North Vancouver in BC, and another one in Burnaby, which is close to North Van, but it's also in BC, that are actually run within the school district. So athletes from that school district can attend that program, and it's run in the morning before school or in the first block. And Volleyball Canada hires the coaches to run it, and it's a academy type program. But the focus is skill development. The focus is not team systems. It's not anything like that, really. And if you've been on as many webinar calls as I've been with our national team coaches, they will tell you our athletes need to improve their skills. There's other areas too, but they need to pass the ball more. They need to serve the ball more in those scenarios where they are able to make mistakes and really push the bar there. So that is really where the REP program, so it's not competing with club, it's not competing with school, it's not competing with provincial team, it's not competing with national team, it's really just enhancing an individual athlete's skills. And I would say that initially it was very focused on sort of those provincial team athletes, and it's kind of evolved a little bit. It's a bit more open now to any athlete that's looking to do that. We also have a large number of clubs across our country that do a tremendous job of skill development with a focus on skill development, not just those open sessions for athletes on weekends. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be in a REP program, but what we want to see is athletes taking advantage of the opportunity to improve their skill development.
Yeah, I know I run the one here in Ottawa, and I know it's always a challenge for us because both the main clubs here in Ottawa already practice 3 times a week and do athletic training, right? So and then their high school season is on at the same time. So especially for the girls, it's hard to get those during the season time to get them in. But I found this year what we did was we just ran a Monday night skill session on a specific position, and we worked on different parts of the skills, and that was well received. And there was a ton of people that are interested in that type of thing, right? Is again, because I can only talk mostly about Ontario, is we're so competition-based programming, unfortunately, that it's tough to just get to work on those skills in January and February, where you just want the reps and you want to make mistakes, you want to learn the skill, where it doesn't cost you demotion for the next tournament and stuff like that. So coaches are more, we enhanced the mistakes in the gym for that session, and it was well received. So it's kind of cool, but there must be problems across the country, different types of problems that each center has to face, right? I mean, like out east, in my understanding, New Brunswick, their club season finishes in December, so they don't go to nationals. So they got a whole 4 months off before competition's done, before they can actually get ready for nationals. So it's those types of things. How do you deal with all those types of things and still want to promote the center in terms of that type of opportunity for athletes?
Well, let's just say when I go into our technical director PTA meetings and I get 13 approvals for anything, so 10 provinces, 3 territories, I take the rest of the day off. I'm like, you know what, my work here is done. So it's very interesting to look at the different systems. A good example with the rep program is, I'll just use my daughter. So my daughter's U17. She can't hear me, so it's okay. She is not a high performance athlete in any way, shape, or form. But on her school team, she played right side. But on her club team, she was a backup setter / libero. So you can kind of define her a little bit by that. She's not very tall. But she went to the Regional Excellence Program in the Okanagan where I live, and she got to set. So she set the whole time. So she got her reps in, didn't take away from her high school coach at all, only improved on her setting, her passing, and her serving. But it was outside of her school. It was outside of her school program and outside of the club program. And she benefited from that. And obviously her team continued to benefit from that. So that's a pretty good example. So some of the challenges are, the clubs. Certainly, I don't think they're as open to athletes getting extra reps sometimes, which is, the rep program is designed to not be, not a lot of jumping, not a lot of, it shouldn't be too strenuous. It's designed to be complementary to the programs that are already running. One of the challenges with the rep program is that for many years, it's just been one person at Volleyball Canada trying to kind of hold that fort. So I'm working hard to expand the resources in the Pathways area so that we can further build out that program and get back to more centers, more opportunities for athletes, and really working with clubs to have a program like that. Whether or not it's a rep program or not, but a program like that can focus on individual athlete skill development. That's a big job. So
right, yeah, it's interesting. We know that in Ontario, Pac-Man has a big program now, and they're advertising all the time. So that's interesting. And then Keith has his program still, I assume, which is he has a big program. He likes talking about it, so I think it does well.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. One of the challenges is, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens, is that our coaches are busy. We have excellent coaches, but they're busy. So the rep program was also, part of it was an opportunity to have coaches being compensated for their expertise. And that's a bit new in Canada. It sounds crazy because I'll tell you, I know most hockey skill providers are paid very, very well, and most of them drive much nicer cars than I do into the parking lot. And so we've always had this idea in hockey that, these kids do extra skills all the time beyond their rep practices and that, but volleyball's never been like that. We've always just, because we've been a volunteer-based coach system, so the goal with the rep program was also to create some sustainability in our coaching in terms of a coach being able to be compensated for their work through a program like this. And so that, originally, and it still continues today to some extent, is that, what we envision a rep coach is somebody that maybe is coaching it, maybe a college or university, maybe part-time. And then this would be able to supplement their income some of our programs traditionally run Monday to Friday. So they were able to still coach on the weekend through whatever avenue they were coaching, but they could also do the rep program to supplement their income and become a professional or a paid coach. And so that's something that I would like to see go a little bit further for these types of programs. And I think that has the opportunity to really advance our sport. And I say that with caution because I do look at the hockey example a little bit. I don't think we want to become like hockey. But I do think there's some opportunities for some coaches to be more immersed in coaching on a more sustainable basis.
Right. So for coaches that are out there, other than the ones in Ottawa, because that's me, they can contact me for that part. And but for the ones in other areas that don't have a rep program, would they just contact you, get in touch with you and say, hey, listen, I saw the podcast and SportsCan does a great job and you did a great job. So we're interested in maybe starting up a program, or how do we start the program? They just should contact you.
Yeah, no, that's great. I get emails on a fairly regular basis from a coach that maybe has just moved to an area. I actually have a coach who's from Saskatchewan, and he just started a program in Cranbrook. So he's doing outdoor training sessions because our restrictions here are allowing that. And he's running it in Cranbrook as sort of like an intro to a fall rep program. And it's 35 degrees today in Cranbrook. So I feel terrible for him because I was like, oh, that's not how we really want to start it off. But and he's a young coach coaching at College of the Rockies who's not immersed in coaching club or running the club or involved in the club, but he's an outside coach coming in with some really strong expertise that I think our athletes really could benefit from.
Cool. Just before we leave the rep program, does anybody have any questions they want to ask Dawna specifically about the rep program?
I'm always available.
If you come up, Aaron, you gonna talk, or is it you just turning your? You're in Ottawa. You don't have.
I find it. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna get my mic down. I find it quite interesting, this rep program, and interesting to hear about it. Like you say, I've been starting to get involved a little bit. I've had an opportunity to just start getting involved for the last couple of years with the Teemo Academy concept, and I find it's been quite interesting. The challenge seems to be to get some type of desire to want to work on skill development. So I really like the way the conversation is going here, and I guess this is where Louise and I work a lot together too, and we talk a lot about that. There's so many common threads, but everybody always seems to think that their way is unique. But I think a lot of the general concepts can be, like you say, on the skill development, just the fact that that leadership exists in everyone, but it might not necessarily have to be the same. And there seems to still be a reluctance to get together. So all I wanted to say is I like the direction we're moving in. I really do like this type of direction. And Colin, I will get in touch with you later on some things. But I still find there's a bit of reluctance to want to teach as a group, or and even it was interesting. I think the Teemo this summer ended up with 200 athletes registered at the 15 or the 14U level because of COVID. As opposed to, I think if we hadn't had that, we probably would have pared it down again to a much smaller group. So I like the direction. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks,
Aaron. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So we'll move from the REP program, and let's talk about, because I was part of the Select program when it was in Kingston, and I'm not sure if that was the first one or was that the second one? Because that was Jane. Was that Brenda?
Looking to Brenda, I was like, I'm sure, because I have to think about the athletes. I think about the athletes. The first one was in Edmonton, and it was, I'm going to say, humidity in the gym. It could have been 40 something, and that was the first year. I think Shawan was the first. That was his first year in Edmonton, and I remember James being there. James is not an event guy. If any of you know James, that's a lot. And it was so hot there. And I can't remember where I was. I think I must have been in Richmond. Big air conditioned, beautiful facility. And I was like, oh, it's not going well. But yeah, that was a second. Kingston was the second.
Yeah, okay, good. Because I got the air conditioning with Brenda, so that was good. And that was like we had a ton of people, and we also lost some to the junior national team because they were competing that year as well, right? And it was a great experience for me working. And there were so many university coaches, and I think that type of experience was great. So maybe talk about where you see that program going. And the youth teams don't compete at the internationally though, right? They compete with each other. Is that how that worked last year?
It depends on the year. I always like a bigger group than a smaller group. I don't know why. It's a lot of admin, but so 3 years ago, we sent 2 teams down to high performance championships. So we had Matt Harris and Sean Skye were the head coaches of that program. So we had 28 athletes that we sent down to high performance championships. Last year we sent 1 team. And I'm trying to rack my brain at this second, trying to figure out why we only sent 1 team. This year, depending on events and that type of thing, we would have likely either sent 1 team. We would have only competed in NORCECA championships this year because there was 2 events that we had to go to. So the evolution of that is, we get a lot of pressure. I remind, not Frank. Frank Boyer is obviously not with Volleyball Canada anymore. He's moved on, which we're so sad about, for those of you who didn't know. But Cassandra Nicol is taking over for Frank. But Frank and Julian didn't really understand why I kept pushing and saying, we have to know sooner. We have to we need to plan sooner. Because with the senior team, it's like, okay, we've got a competition. Okay, let's go. Like it's everybody's available. I said, I'm dealing with parents who have never done this. And I said, we need to plan earlier. And the reality is sometimes with NORCECA, that's just really not possible. Each year is a little bit different in terms of the competition we're going to go to. That's why we like the high performance championships, because it was consistent year to year. We knew we were going to the US this date for this competition, and it was good competition for us. It was a good level. So NORCECA just adds a whole nother element to the planning process. But boy, we get a lot of pressure from provincial organizations as well to know earlier, because they can plan for Canada Cup. They can plan. They know it's the third week. I can tell you when it is in 2021 in Calgary already, whereas I can't tell you if there'll be a NORCECA event for age class in January or not. So those are some different realities that we just have to go through. A good example, a quick one is our team that went to World Championships last year. They were in Cairo, Egypt. I was very nervous. There was a lot of anxiety and, a lot of risk management strategies went into that. A lot of conversations. And, the parents were fantastic. So we were all set to go to Cairo. We had the dates, we had everything else. About 2 weeks before, I get the package from from FIVB saying that our team is playing in Ismailia City. And I was like, so thankfully I Google Ismailia City. It's an hour and 45 minutes from Cairo. One of the biggest risk management issues that we had from Egypt was limit your time on transit. Limit your time in transit anywhere, because that is an issue. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then, so I'm like emailing the FIVB going, you can't do that to us. What are we going to, so we ended up staying at a hotel that was 3 minutes from the gym in Ismailia City. But all the parents had to decide if they were going to change venues or change hotels. And so one of the parents said, how can you do this? How can you do this? And I said, it's not me. It's really not me. So there's a learning curve in terms of this international travel that many of you can probably speak to very well. And you have to be able to sort of go with the flow and each year sort of look at each group and say, okay, do we know who these athletes are? Have we identified them previously? Do we need to start fresh? Do we need to have a selection camp? Do we not have a selection camp? What does that look like each year? And each year we go through the steps of that process. We would love to have a selection camp. We would love to have a week-long, 2 weeks long, 3 weeks long selection camp. That would be fantastic. But the reality is that our athletes are traveling from across the country. So we have an athlete on Vancouver Island, and we have one in Nova Scotia. To bring those athletes after they've already competed at club national championships and paid for club national championships, to be able to have them fly somewhere else and come together is a real challenge. And we are very, very concerned about the cost to families to do something like that. So can we identify athletes through national championships, which we've done for a few years? Do we feel that we need to have a selection camp? Can we expand the list of athletes so that we're not sort of cutting it down so finite that there's no room? So the year we had 28 athletes on the men's side is a good example. Could we have cut that down to 14? Maybe, but then that would have meant that more sort of pressure to have a selection camp, and that may not have paid the benefit of having 28 athletes in that program.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're almost becoming a university program where you have to start recruiting. Except you're the only one. You don't have any competition. You just have to convince them that they want to spend a bunch of money in the summer and play on it with the Canada Maple Leaf on their shirt. But
I hope we don't have to get. I tell people all the time I have the best job because I just get to tell kids they've made the team. So I'm like, oh, good. I always get to be that voice. It's been an evolution to watch. I'm really proud of our young athletes and our families. I've worked with some of the best families in terms of their openness and their willingness to support the program, especially such a short duration program. We don't get the parents, the club, the cooler parent. We don't get we don't have that kind of relationship with the families. So for them to sort of trust us and say like, yeah, I want my kid to be part of this is a huge responsibility. When you don't have a previous relationship, could be good, it could be bad, but we'd love to know all the parents. That's why the virtual program has been so fun for me, is that I've actually gotten to see the athletes' faces on a regular basis and kind of get to know their personalities. And I'm not necessarily always part of the selection committee, but to get to see and get to know the athletes through even online has been a real benefit.
So the selection committee, I was just thinking, who's like the selection committee is just who are they?
So typically with our youth programs, we start off with receiving the athlete list from the provinces. So the PTAs send us a list of athletes, and that is that's our starting point. So that's really quite critical. Some provinces do it. There's many ways that they go about doing that. It may already be athletes that are in their provincial team program. It may be athletes that they've identified throughout their club season or through various ways, and they bring that list to us. So that's our starting point for identification. The second piece is, I know that kids don't always realize this, but the coaches in Canada at different age groups are incredibly connected. They're incredibly tight. They're an incredibly tight group of coaches. So typically with our coach, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, typically with our coaches, we would look to have coaches from various regions across Canada be part of that selection committee, so that we're getting perspectives from other areas. And then obviously national championships, being able to watch the athletes both at provincials. Typically we have coaches, because they're from across the country, are at provincials. So we see them typically we'll see them at provincial championships and national championships. Then that's really part of it. Another piece that we've added on fairly recently, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I think this is a big learning out of this, is the ability to have video. The ability for athletes to submit video on their play. I say highlight video. We don't always want to see just highlights. We just want to see a variety, but so that's a big piece of it. So those elements, and then whether or not we're going to have a selection camp. Like I said, it depends. For the team that went to World Championships, that's not the team that qualified for World Championships. So that team, all those athletes were invited to a selection camp, as well as additional athletes that had gone through either that had been identified through national championships, through their provinces, whatever it was, were also invited. So we had 36 athletes at that final selection camp for that team that competed at U18 Worlds. So, and that team makeup was somewhat different. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm going to say 3 or 4 athletes were.
Yeah, because I think that was the year before is when it was the first time we went to Florida, right? And I went with Carrie and Mike and those guys, and we had that selection process was 2 camps, right? There was one out west, the selection camp out west, and then a selection camp in Ontario for the east. And then Carrie got on the call with the 2, because he came here and watched this one, and then got on the call with the guys that ran it out west, and we all sort of hashed out what we thought, and then he made the final decision. We put it all on his head to make the final decision, and then that's how we selected that team. So that was the first time that you sort of did follow that process, right?
Yeah, and that's that was a great learning as well, and I think it was it answered it checked off a lot of the boxes. One of the learnings from that is that the head coach needs to go to both of them. That was a big learning we had from that one. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it didn't happen on the girls' side. I can't remember, but that was a real challenge. That was the learning from that one, is to have the head coach at both. And at the end of the day, with these youth teams, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to absolutely make mistakes. We accept that. We acknowledge it. Not everybody always wants to hear it, but we absolutely are going to make mistakes in athlete identification. Are we going to be 100% wrong? No. Are we going to be 25% wrong? Probably, at least 25% wrong. But that 25%, if you're talking about 28 athletes, there's some range there, and especially with development. Look at some of our young athletes, how much they've grown from being a 16-year-old to being an 18-year-old. And, that part of the, when you get back sort of why did we start running these programs, we needed to get to know who these athletes are that are going to represent Canada one day on the international stage. If we're not seeing who they are or how they've developed until they're 22, that's a problem. We need to know who they are, their work ethic, their, all those characteristics that we know are of a high performance athlete. If we're only able to see them for a week when they're 22 or whatever it is, that may cause more issues than being able to run these programs over the course of,
Yeah, your increase in error is your area is going to go up. Your percentage of errors are going to go up that way because it's not enough time. Whereas your core athletes are going to come out of your programs that have been there, right? I mean, an athlete is an athlete, and then there's some that we're going to mature and come in and be part of the program. But I think you're going to get a core set that will be beneficial and that will draw other people with them and pull them up, right? When they have those experiences. So
as part of our virtual program, we had the senior athletes talking to our youth athletes, and it was phenomenal. And I'm going to get this, it's escaping me. I'm going to say Arthur Schwartz. Did he go to Trinity? Thank you, Brenda. He never played youth, junior.
Right. He went to York.
Did he go?
He went to York, but he left after 2 years.
Yeah. He didn't play on the youth team. He's on the senior national team. So that's a really good example. And we tell kids that all the time, even the athletes going to NAP or that tried out for a NAP, any of those, that you're going to develop in different ways. It's how you develop that's going to be the real critical piece. What you personally do to develop. We could have selected a kid at 15 pretty easily, and I'm just throwing it out as a example. A kid at 15 who we thought was going to be there, and they're not. And I think we all have good examples of those kids who look fantastic when they're 14, and man, those kids are off, out of the park, and by 17 they look exactly the same as they did when they were 14. And that's why we want to make sure that base is really wide for those younger athletes, and provide an opportunity to continue to allow them to.
Yeah, it goes to what Vicky was talking about in terms of the social emotional side, right? I mean, that's the side that we don't, and Carrie talked about it too. It's hard to evaluate that side, but that's the side that's going to make, and Kyle clearly stated, that's the thing that's going to make or break an athlete, is their social emotional side and their skill level at that. You can be the best athlete, but if you don't have the social emotional side to go with it, then you're not going to be as successful as you possibly can. So I think that's why you need to see them over long periods of time, and you got to give them lots of growth, because even the ones that I think show up in your program later on, they probably have a high social emotional IQ because they've developed resilience, they developed perseverance, because they kept going when they weren't getting recognized for that maple leaf, but they kept pursuing it. And they're going to be the ones that are, that athlete in your gym that is pulling everybody together, is working hard, and is always there for the team because they've developed those skills over the time. Whereas that 15-year-old stud, it's all about him. Him or her have been told that she or he's the best. They don't have to work harder. Now they get in the fixed mindset where they're stuck because, well, wait a sec, I'm supposed to be the best, but if I make a mistake, I'm not the best. And then they hurt themselves because they get stuck in that I'm the best component versus I just need to work hard to get better at my craft. So
well, if you ever have a chance to listen to Kyle Paquette speak, I'll tell you right now, you get rid of that ego real fast, because it's not going to get you anywhere. The only thing that's going to get you somewhere is the hard work. So, I feel so lucky to be part of this community and this sport. This summer's been so interesting in so many ways, and I talk about our virtual programs, and so we ran 3 virtual programs. So our U20 women, which was the competition that was supposed to happen in May. So that group had already really been sort of nailed down, I'll say. And then our U19 men, which turns out to be sort of our 2003 born or later. I use birth years because it makes more sense to me, but so 2003 or later. So we had 30 athletes as part of that program, and they did 2 phases. They did 2 week-long, twice a day sessions. Very technically driven, but a lot of information, like a lot, like so much that I was like, my eyes were a bit, but a lot of information, but a lot on exactly what you spoke to, Colin, a lot on the sort of the leadership and those characteristics and those life skills that they needed to sort of get hammered home to them. I hope some of them heard it, that you're just, and Kyle used the example. He said, there's 30 people on this call. He said, Dawna, he said, what's the pool? What's the big pool? And I said, well, it's Canada Games year. I said, so, if you think about 13 teams, each team has 12, that could be how big the pool is, essentially. And he's like, oh, well, it's, say 300. He said 300. He said, you guys are 30 of those 300. He said, so there's 270 that could be doing more than you right now, and you don't even know it. He said, but then he said, how many of you are going to go into the junior team? How many are you going to go into the U21 team? And he's like, and I'm not a dream crusher. So he's like, what, 5 or 6? And I was like, well, maybe more than that. But, but this is really hitting it pretty real for those younger athletes, the U19s. And I think it was important. I think they have a lot of growing to do. And I see it in, by the people around me, and they have a lot of maturing to do. And so this was a good opportunity to kind of get in their heads a little bit and work through that with them. I hope that there's sort of long-term sustainable growth from that.
Yeah, I mean, you see the athletes that take that stuff into personally and absorb it all and start working on it. And you end up seeing them even if it's not a national team program, but they're excelling at whatever they do, just because they've understood the personal development and pushing themselves. So that's what I liked about that.
Can I ask or make a comment?
Yep.
One of the things that I think should be discussed and maybe considered is consultation with existing clubs when you're considering an athlete, because they would know them inside out. And sometimes we find out, that an athlete from our club has been selected for this program and we didn't even know they were being considered. And they may have anything from huge emotional issues to huge financial issues. And it's like completely isolated from the club system and in some cases even the provincial system. So I think that could be better. The second thing is it would be really helpful if all the clubs were given almost like minimum standards. You need to touch 11.4 or whatever to be considered in the middle as a male at 18 years old or whatever they are, and male and female. And I know you can't do that for every position, but you can certainly do it for the attacking ones. And then the other thing is in the selection process, having a few people who are designated, they don't have to be volleyball people, who are designated specifically to evaluate interactions and responses to errors, and and their own errors and their teammates' errors, because those behaviors speak volumes to the character of individuals. And if you're down to the last few spots and things are really even, some of those character things can make or break. Well, last one thought was, when a youth or a junior program is being selected and training, I personally think having 2 or 3 short-term training spots for athletes who are 1 or 2 years behind, that are younger, just to get a taste and a little more, so when they come the next year, they're more prepared. Sort of like a building block succession plan type of strategy. They can be self-funded or funded through their clubs or whatever, but I think we narrow the base too young. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. That's great. No, I think just to address the club side of things, I would suggest that because typically our programming comes out a bit late, later than I would prefer, and I think that involving the clubs becomes a bit more challenging. And I would say that I would have expected or thought that the provinces were sort of integrated a little bit more into sort of that club side. And that's something we need to probably work on better with our clubs and with our PTAs, and really close that gap, because I do understand what you're saying. And, I think there's some things that have been good so far, but we have had, every once in a while, it would be good to have some information ahead of time. And that's great. I think in terms of expanding the roster, I think that's a really quite a valid point. And we do watch, typically we have alternates involved in the program. That's very, very common that we would have alternates, typically 2 or 3. Depending, I've had to book a plane ticket at the last minute to get a kid from a provincial team down.
Dawna, sorry, I'm not talking about alternates. I'm talking about developmental, the Shawan at 17, training with the 19U team, if he's not quite there. You know what I mean? Adriana Bento's son, how old is he now? 15, 16?
16.
He's 16 now.
Kids like that are so far above their age group, and it could maybe really benefit from a small taste of those elite programs before they're ready.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the, it's a great idea. And one of the things we did this summer, which I would have liked to expand on further, and I think we will continue to expand on, is that we had 2 athletes that were in the Ottawa area, and the team was training, well, not the team, a few athletes were training in Gatineau. So those athletes were able to go with the senior team. And so that's kind of a unique opportunity that doesn't always happen. Trust me, in our ideal environment, we would have all of these teams training in the same location, in the same gym, in the same dorms, eating meals together, across the board for 2 months. That would be sort of maybe 3. We'll go with 3. That would be really our ideal environment. But again, I get the toughest part of my job is balancing costs with the program we deliver. So for example, to have, if I have, I'm going to just use example, if I have 4 coaches and 2 of them have access to a free gym, and that isn't a cost that is put onto the athletes, or they have access to some type of food and accommodation that is reasonable, or it's closest to an airport to get them to and back from a competition as economically as possible. Those are all things that I weigh in terms of how to run these programs as cost effective as possible. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it wasn't. I don't even know what I would do if I didn't have to negotiate and manage all that. If I could just book something. So that's something that we're working with. It's hard. Gatineau doesn't have necessarily, dorms and accommodation and food services. That's challenging. Richmond doesn't either. And so, what was our give and take available? And if we had that as an option, we could plan a little bit easier to have those, and I don't want to use the word alternate. I know what I'll say extended roster, yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic to have some athletes like that involved. So it's definitely, that's a good one.
Can I say something? I don't know if just take what Brenda said, and of course you remember my son when we spoke about the national team here. He's not here anymore. He's in Brazil now. He played for Brazil because of dual citizenship. But I think like Canada improved so much, right? Like in terms like the athletes, how many good athletes you have. I think national team now have the junior national team is a big change compared what it was before. I think everything is going very well. The only part that I see, not a problem, that I see just how I see this for the beach side too, don't worry, is sometimes we align ourselves too much about the provincial team. And I see a lot of kids, they're not in the provincial team for different reasons. And we lost these kids. They're not going to be involved for finance, like Brenda said, or because they have a better training outside with their own club. There's always sometimes be in touch with clubs, the coach can give a better feedback. Like in my story with my son was he's already played 2 years in a row for a U18 team. He was young, yes, but nobody thought about him being the national team here in Canada just because he is age in that time. And he's already 14 years old playing the big guys. Like you said before, we don't know, especially for the men's side, when the kid's going to develop and how much. And they can develop it when they're 17, 18, 19 or not. We don't know. I just think I don't talk myself here as a mom, I just as a coach, like we as a national team have to be more open, like more eyes everywhere. And if you just wait for the provincial team to give the best players, we're going to miss some. And I think provincial team improves so much now in their work, how they work with the kids, the program that they create now. But we're still going to miss kids because we have a lot of kids outside the provincial team. And sometimes you're going to miss great kids outside. Just a situation that what's happened with my son. Not that he's great at what he is right now, but I don't want to have happen with other kids. And this can happen. If we now look for young age, not for them to be in the national team, by the way, but see and track them from the young age to see, let's see in 2 years, what's to happen with the kid, girl, kid, like boy, right? Like what's going to happen with them in 2 years. And from 14, 15, 16 is a huge change. And 17, 18 is crazy. how much they change, or they're not gonna play the same they played before, or they're gonna play so much better compare what they played before. It's just my question for you is how much the indoor coach be involved with the coach that has selected these kids right now, like for both gender, for the women's side and for the men's side. How much the indoor coach is involved? They know this is the type of athletes that I'm looking for the youth, and this is what I need them to be when they come to me in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I don't know how many years.
Yeah, it took me a sec there, but I know what you're asking. So one of the things I just want to really have everyone understand, and it's really important, is that when I say we start with a provincial team list or a list coming from the provinces, it is a starting place, and it is here. And then we have these other avenues, because that's something that we also really acknowledge, is that there are athletes that aren't playing provincial team. We know lots of them. There are athletes that aren't involved in that, or they play for a club that perhaps isn't exposed to provincial team or whatever it is. So that is definitely a factor. So one of the big takeaways that we've had just really recently is Shannon Windsor, our next gen coach, going around on the women's side and doing our National Excellence Program identification camps throughout the country. So she did 10 camps, over 200 and some athletes. I probably can go on record as saying I don't remember the last time we ever did anything like that, where we had a national team coach in gyms in almost every province, working with the coaches, both club coaches, as well as other coaches involved, getting the message across about what we're looking for national team athletes and what things athletes need to work on. And if you've met Shannon, you'll know she's pretty, she's not a wallflower. And so to me, that is one of the first times that I know in 8 years that we've done that. So two things. One, Shannon doing that is a real best practice and something we want to continue. Two, our gold medal profile, and Carrie talked about that, is continuing to develop those standards so every club coach can look and say, okay, this is what we're looking for. But we can't just do that without giving that coach enough knowledge and education to know how to move their athlete towards that bar. Because nothing scares me more than saying, if you jump this high, you're going to make the national team. Then if you do this, and this, you might jump that high, and you might, so those are two really, really critical pieces for me, is that it's great to have that, how to get there. But we also have to provide the coaching knowledge along the way to assist coaches in getting there, so that we don't have coaches just, going, I'm going to put kids on and I don't think a coach actually says, I'm going to put kids on the national team program. I really don't think a coach would say that, but we know that our sport has changed, and we know that clubs in their way have changed to be, certainly more professional. We're seeing, obviously, NCAA scholarships at I follow a lot of clubs on Instagram. I see a lot of kids wearing a lot of sweatshirts, and it's not because the kid's posting it, it's because the club's posting it. So those are things that I think we need to continue to work on our coaching education side as well, and expose more coaches to our national team. And expose them. Brenda, I think of when you were talking about exposing more kids, younger kids, I want to see more coaches there. I want to see more
Absolutely.
coaches, more provinces saying to their Canada Games coach, be it whatever, you need to go. So I'll use Nova Scotia as an example. Nova Scotia Volleyball had Megan and John, who are their paid staff, spend a week in the Richmond Training Center with Tom Black. Now, what they can take from that is massive.
Absolutely.
And that didn't cost Volleyball Canada anything. That didn't cost us anything, but the level of knowledge that they gained from doing that was priceless, really.
Yeah, that's been a bone I've been picking for a long time within the province, that we've got this living lab and the high performance center, you know, a 9-day thing with 16-year-olds. And every coach who, I don't want to say produce, but you know what I mean, that is linked to a kid who achieved acceptance at the high performance center should be invited to come at their own expense to observe the training and learn. And right now it's really closed, and I don't think it needs to be.
No, I don't think so. And how do we do that? And how do we do that? And you know, the NET program is a great example where we have that kind of time frame where we can, unfortunately, travel obviously is an issue, but without that, I agree with you. We look at this, and I don't want to say lab because I know what you're meaning, but you know, this opportunity to have coaches come in. Our plan actually, which I was really excited about, was because we weren't able to run the performance coach workshop in June like we had planned. The plan was actually to run our performance coach workshop at our NET program in September. And I thought, this is perfect. This is exactly what we want our coaches. It's the context, it's the athletes, it's a training environment. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just talking about coaches taking the initiative too, but you know, I mean, with what I did with Carrie and that, Jared came with us and he paid his own way, and now he's part of the program because he gained so much knowledge and experience because he loved it. He has a passion for it, obviously.
We still make him pay. No, I'm just kidding. We pay for his plane ticket now.
But he pursued that, right? I mean, that's what coaches need to do. And the other one on your side is when you talk about, it's easy to send one coach somewhere to do huge amounts of athlete identification and stuff than having a whole bunch of athletes come to one location to be identified too. So that's another thing in terms of, I think you guys are starting to figure that part out as well. And with technology too, like just doing these types of webinars and that, you know, we're getting the message out, we're getting Volleyball Canada people talking to people out there. I think it's important. And Volleyball Coaches of Canada, their Facebook group stuff, there's 1,200 coaches on that. 1,200? Is that right, Brenda? And there, you know, so there's messages getting out there and communication going on now with coaches throughout the country. So I think there's that opportunity for that communication to continue to grow and for us to continue to develop those connections so that the athletes don't get missed. And I think it is the club coach and is I don't say overwhelmed or starstruck when they hear national program. So they're not, I would say in general, most of them would not take the initiative to contact the national program to say, hey, so I got this athlete, right? And I think if we can break those barriers down and show that we're all, you know, we all sleep, we all pull our pants on one leg at a time, and we're all in a coaching community, we all love the sport, and that's our common bond. Maybe we can get coaches more willing to take, I guess I always say, take out outside your comfort zone, to take that risk to talk to someone you don't know, but you know, you sort of put on a pedestal and find out that it's not so bad. I think if we can make that happen more and more often, I think we're going to get what Brenda and Adriana is talking about in terms of that communication between club and national team and become more, join it closer together. I mean, it'll never be tight, but make it closer and closer together and make it easier and easier to make those types of things happen. So the athlete benefits in the end. And then as well as the coaching. I mean, our coaches right now, Glenn is not going to be around forever. So we somehow need to find that replacement. And that's a hard shoes to fill in. You know, Dan's working hard at it, but you know, Dan won't be around forever. So, you know, we've got to keep building.
Might be.
Well, he's not good a shape, true. But, you know, but I mean, those are the things we want to keep doing is how do we keep replacing coaches? Well, we can't just magically make them happen. We've got to get them building and get their confidence up and get them exposed to these things earlier and earlier. I mean, I don't think Glenn was, other than when he was in the national team program, his coaching experience probably wasn't involved where he didn't get to be part of youth national teams because we didn't have anything like that. So if we can shorten that learning curve for our coaches, I think that's going to benefit our athletes in the long term as well. So I think you know, those are like what Adriana and Brenda have mentioned is a good thing. And I think, Dawna, you're doing a great job of promoting that. You agreed to come on here. So, I mean, that's one, you know, that's a good step right there alone.
This is the end of part 1. Thanks for watching. Click in the top left-hand corner for part 2. Be sure to subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it.